Welcome, everyone. We are going to have our third speaker for the 2022 LGBTQ plus Math Day. That is Joseph Nakao. Joseph is a fifth-year PhD candidate at the University of Delaware with a research focus on developing efficient and robust algorithms for solving partial differential equations, with a particular emphasis on plasma physics applications. Raised near Seattle, he stayed close to home and got his Bachelor's of Science in Applied Mathematics from Seattle University. Joseph is the current membership committee chair on Spectra's board of directors, as well as co-founder of the Queer and Trans Graduate Student Union at the University of Delaware. He has written an MAA, Math Association of America, Math Values blog article on LGBTQ plus inclusivity in mathematics departments, co-organized an AMS-sponsored, the AMS-sponsored posters celebrating LGBTQ plus mathematicians, been a panelist at the Joint Math Meetings 2022 Spectral Workshop, and is an organizer of the upcoming, actually, it just happened, Society for Industrial Applied Math annual meeting in Pittsburgh showcasing LGBTQ plus applied mathematicians. Welcome, Joseph.
Awesome. Thank you, Ron. And also thank you to Anthony and Juliet, the other co-organizers, for inviting me to give this talk. So I, last minute, decided to actually take out all of the math I had. So because I felt like that wasn't the point of what I wanted to get across. So I apologize that there will be no partial differential equations in my talk. But I'm mostly concerned today about talking about how to navigate graduate school as a queer student. And in my experience, what can students and departments do to promote and help support their queer students? So I'll say a little about me, and then there are sort of two parts of my talk. The first is I'll talk about what I feel departments can do to support their students. And then the second part will be about what I believe current students could do from my own experiences. So who is this Joseph Nakao that you're all here to listen talk? So I am a gay applied mathematician. I completed my undergrad at Seattle University. I came out my freshman year at Seattle University back in 2014, which for me feels like forever, but no, not necessarily for other people. So as Ron mentioned, I am currently in my last year of my PhD at the University of Delaware. And last year, I helped co-found the Queer and Trans Grad Student Union, or QTGSU, at the University of Delaware. And on the right here, got the all of my co-founders. They said I could use this photo here. So this is the wonderful, wonderful board from last year that helped get it up and running. And then I've been a Spectra board member since 2021 last year, and have been reelected to remain on the board for the next year. So that's a little about me. We'll talk more about my experiences going for the rest of the talk, though. So what can math departments do to better support their queer students? So I, as Ron also mentioned, I wrote an MAA Math Values blog post about this. I'm sort of just going to recap and elaborate a little more on what I mentioned in that article. But to me, I think a question that a lot of departments ask themselves is, how can you determine if your students are happy? And this need not be restricted just to LGBTQ plus students and just students in general. And when I thought about this question, I thought there are really three things that I think students need to be happy. One is they need to be heard, they need to feel included, and they need to feel less alone. So in my article, I wrote not alone, but realized that that maybe wasn't the best choice of words, rather less alone. So this part of the talk is going to center around how can we help increase these three things. Now, of course, it goes without saying, but the students' opinions are the ones that matter, right? So you can't start to help the students unless you don't prioritize the students. As with all relationships in life, professional, personal, whatever, communication is key. Communication, communication, communication. Now, this goes especially, I believe, for faculty, but one key assumption that is necessary for all of this progress to be made, everyone needs to go into these conversations with both humility and an open mind. So I find that in my experience, when people lack the humility to acknowledge when they're wrong, no progress will be made, no matter what you say you want to do. So that is a key assumption that everyone needs to go into these conversations with. The mouse is not working. Okay. So we're all mathematicians here, probably. So I have a small conjecture for all of you. And my experience, that conjecture is, if your department focuses on building general friendliness and thoughtfulness, then the LGBTQ plus inclusivity flourishes. So I find that in my experience, departments try too hard to improve the diversity and inclusion for any specific marginalized group. So rather than trying to specifically focus, how can we really help specifically, LGBTQ plus students? I find if your department focuses just on being friendly and being thoughtful, making it so that students trust you, then all of the diversity follows naturally. Right? So you can't just focus on this without students feeling safe around you. And I find that these are the two things that you need to really focus on. And with that comes empathy and thoughtfulness. So clearly the thoughtfulness, be thoughtful for the students, have empathy for what your students are going through. Try to build community. So a student won't feel safe. They won't feel part of the community. They won't feel included unless you focus on building that community and emphasize it. And then don't be afraid to set the example. Just a single ally makes a huge difference. Even if your department is particularly narrow-minded in helping and how to help increase the diversity of the student population in the department, if one faculty member is willing to speak up, that can make a huge difference for the students. Just having one person, even if the department moves at a snail's pace, that one faculty member can make the difference. Now, what are some ideas that I have for departments to help increase their LGBTQ plus EDI? So these are coming from my personal experiences. They need not be the only ideas that lead to success, but these are what I have found have led to success. One, so when I attended Seattle University, they do a phenomenal job at building community, making students feel safe and heard. It's unlike any atmosphere I've ever had in any interaction with any group. And one idea that I found worked was a single community room, emphasis on the community. So some departments have a room designated just for faculty or just for students. And there's this segregation between the two entities. And Seattle U has one community room that is used equally by students and the faculty. And so this lack of separation led to a lot of interaction between students and faculty. But what's something small that I think works is, decorate your community room. Otherwise, it's just another classroom, right? So I find, you don't need to decorate it with a whole bunch of gaudy accessories, although, I'm sure students wouldn't mind that either, but just make it feel a little more homey, make it feel comfortable for the students. The students should want to be there. You don't want it to just be, like I mentioned, another classroom that you've designated to the students and they're there purely because it's the only place that they can work. They should want to be there. Make your community room a place of warmth. Make it someplace students want to be by their own choice. And so this is the Seattle University community room before they got kicked out of the engineering building, and now we're in the science and math building. So they're working on redecorating their new community room. Another strategy that I found at Seattle U worked great for increasing diversity and community of the faculty and the students were these Socratic style TA meetings. So at Seattle U, it's only undergraduate math students. And so the TAs, or learning assistants, we call them LAs, they would meet every week with the instructors that they were LAing for. And these meetings would be very highly informal and maybe half an hour long, sometimes less, sometimes more. And we would all sit in a circle. This is not us. I took this from Denver Public Schools, but we would sit in some kind of circle like that. And we would simply go around the room and talk about how your week went. So, you go around, you mention what went well in your discussion section, or the professors, what went well in the lecture, what's something that you want to talk about. And some examples could be, one, my students couldn't understand tangent lines despite my multiple explanations. So it could be something more mathematical, saying in my discussion, I just couldn't understand how to explain this to students. And then this discourse amongst faculty and students occurs. But you could also talk about something maybe a little less mathematical and a little more personal on the interaction side. For one, I had a student start to break down. Perhaps they couldn't understand the material. And you want to know, how could I handle the situation in the future? This is part of teaching. It's part of leading discussions even. And then faculty give their opinion, say, oh, here's how we handle it while respecting the student, but also respecting you and making sure we don't break any violations. But my point here is that this informal Socratic style meeting not only brought faculty and students closer together by talking about what to do from the teaching side of things, but by having these sorts of conversations, you're showing the students you care about the students. You care about how students are treated, how they feel. You build the empathy, you demonstrate the empathy that is often lacking in these sorts of TA trainings. And it's only going to help raise the EDI naturally. So topics of LGBTQ plus inclusivity or diversity might not occur here, but the point is you're building the community, you're setting the foundation in the department so that students will feel comfortable coming to you about these sorts of EDI topics. That's the goal that that's what we're going for here. Now, what's something else you can do? Well, for one, as I've mentioned multiple times already, students need to trust you. They need to trust that they'll be heard. And one thing that I think is sometimes some people might say obvious, but I think a lot of faculty often overlook, something simple you could do. Just ask for your students' pronouns and try your best to remember them. Something I do, I always give a note card to every student whenever I begin my lecture, first day of class, with the, your confidence level, blah, 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 blah. But one of them is, what are your pronouns? And I make an effort to make sure I remember them. Goes a huge ways. For some students, just feeling comfortable enough to tell you their pronouns and trusting that you'll remember them. It takes a lot of bravery for some students, and understanding that empathy, respecting that is huge. Using diverse examples in your class need not be LGBTQ plus specific, but just show some diversity in the examples that you use. Your language, for one. Don't say you guys, use a more gender neutral term. I always say just y'all, or you're from the South, all y'all. And then one thing I've started doing that I found great success is incorporating social justice and environmentalism into your existing modules. So I highly recommend you all read this wonderful book edited by Karali and Kajavi. So Lily will be on the panel today on Mathematics for Social Justice, where the book talks about how to incorporate these topics in your coursework. So I give one example here. Modeling rising sea levels with some differential equation, perhaps. Clearly a mathematical topic, clearly has a physical application, but most people leave it there. Most faculty would leave the project at that. But the book mentions when you start to incorporate the humanity in this, how does this affect climate refugees? How does this affect the local economy with the destruction of crops? When you start bringing in these more social justice and environmentalism topics, not only are you having the students think about the ethics behind the mathematics, but you're showing them again that you care about these topics. You show the humanity, you show that you have the empathy for people. Students will just naturally feel more comfortable coming to you about these topics because you've demonstrated that you care about these topics. So those are just a couple ideas I have. And just be kind. Just be kind. faculty being kind to students goes a long ways. My mouse is broken again. And then lastly, what can faculty do? Stay up to date on LGBTQ+ events. So I think the slides before here have kind of addressed how you can make students feel heard and how you can make them feel included by this sense of warmth and community. But showing that is helping make students feel less alone. To me, it doesn't mean you have to have a bunch of LGBTQ+ faculty on staff necessarily. But, the diversity couldn't hurt, but show students that they're not alone here. I mean, we have this huge community here today, right? And I think, to me, I never knew when I was an undergrad, despite how diverse and queer-friendly Seattle is, I had no idea that there's this huge community of LGBTQ+ mathematicians. And I would have loved to know that, just knowing there's a community that I would fit in. So stay up to date on events locally on campus. And then also workshops and conferences. So the SciAm annual meeting, we had Spectra had a panel there. JMM 23, Spectra has a lot going on in Boston this January. The SciAm Computational Science and Engineering Conference in Amsterdam, the Netherlands, Spectra will be there too. And then we also have a conference coming up next year. And then the other mathematical organizations, the American Mathematical Society, the Mathematical Association of America, and SciAm, they host events that promote, or symposia that promote LGBTQ+ EDI. The Society for Mathematical Biology has also had many symposia before that focus on our community. Spectra, of course, the Association for LGBTQ+ Mathematicians. Become a member today. You could be an individual or institutional or professional member. And then Out in STEM, which isn't necessarily mathematical, but I'm going to classify it here as well. So that's what I think departments can do. Now, what can current students do? What can you do if you're a student? So as I've mentioned, you belong to our community. This community here, I hope that at bare minimum, students who are here leave this conference knowing that there is a community of LGBTQ+ mathematicians worldwide. I mean, Ron in the chat had everyone say where they're located right now, and it's an extremely international community. So that's the first one. There are other people out there. Now, what I recommend you could do, and this is more geared towards the grad students, but certainly applies to undergrads as well. Finding friends within your department or even your university could be huge. So, in my experience, I didn't feel safe necessarily because of any friends I would meet who were also queer, but friends that you trust, allies even. They could be straight, but if they're an ally that you trust, they're a friend that you feel safe around, that is, I think, most important. You have someone that makes you feel heard and safe in your department or your university. Focus on those friends. Try to look for queer student organizations. Now, sometimes some people vibe with these tribes, as Professor Truxie said. Some people often don't vibe with them. So make your own call, but try looking into those organizations on campus. Most schools these days have a queer student organization of some sort. And if not, I put an asterisk here. You could start a queer student organization, preferably with others. So I put a star here because I don't want anyone to feel forced to do anything that they're not comfortable doing. But last year, the QTGSU that I helped co-found it's made a huge impact on campus. I knew I was clearly not going to be the only LGBTQ+ person on the entire campus of the University of Delaware. But as we've gained traction, the membership is over 150 students, grad students too, just grad students, and would have never known that the community was that big at the University of Delaware. So how we got started, a couple other members sent an email out to the grad student emailing list saying, we want to start this organization, who wants in? And 6 of us responded, and that was the board that you saw in the first slide. So that's how we got going. And then You could also join professional organizations. So Spectra, we have a mailing list that you can join to keep up to date on the activities that we're doing. And that being said, you could attend events like this today. I think these are ideas to feel included in our community. And most importantly, prioritize your safety and do only what you're comfortable doing. I don't want to encourage anyone to do anything they're not comfortable doing. Safety is the top priority. Now, for grad students navigating the job market, so I'm with you. I am navigating the job market right now, and this is my personal opinion, but it's what I want to talk about. I think the biggest advice I would have to people in my position would be, where do you draw the line? So in a perfect world, we would be working in an extremely liberal blue state, in an extremely liberal forward-thinking area that's sensitive to diversity, in an institution or a company that is extremely aware of benefits for same-sex marriages or partnerships. Unfortunately, the odds of this for most people is just so slim. So that being said, I think it's important. The biggest advice I had from a professor was, find your line. What will you tolerate? And then don't settle past that line. So for me, red or blue state, for my personal choice, I will not work in a red state. I will not. And that's the choice I've made. I look at state and local laws, even if it's a blue state. If the local laws make me feel unsafe, I will not work there. I look at the local demographics. I look at the US Census and I see how many same-sex households are in the area. I'm applying for academic tenure track jobs, and in the interviews I've been having, I ask about the existing diversity efforts. If I can't be convinced that my diversity efforts would be respected, that's someplace I wouldn't want to work. And then also I look at the healthcare benefits for same-sex couples. So need not be in academia. This also applies to industry or the labs. These are things I value, and this is where I've drawn my line. But I find that once you draw your line, knowing where to apply and make your decisions makes the process easier on you. Now, what about if you're an undergrad and you're either a prospective grad student or you're perhaps wanting to go straight into industry? This applies there too. So something I will mention is, make sure you have reach schools, probable schools, and realistic. I hate the term backup school. I hate that term. So I say realistic schools, schools you'll realistically think you could get into. Make sure you have that spectrum of schools, because you don't want to be left with no options at all. Something, I mean, clearly me getting into a PhD at University of Delaware has worked out, but something I wish I'd known a little more about back when I was a senior in college, looking into master's programs that offer teaching assistantships. So sometimes master's programs are less competitive than PhD programs. Not always true, especially like in engineering programs, but look into this, because that will also broaden and expand the universities that you could apply to. And again, where do you draw your line for grad school? Not necessarily applied versus pure math or the projects that they have or the faculty on staff, but the state, the demographics, the faculty demographics, etc. Right? Where do you draw your line? Talk to people at conferences or events like this. For example, the JMM, Spectra will have a huge contingency there, and other LGBTQ+ members of the community will be there as well. So talk with people, get their opinion on their university. Don't be afraid to email faculty or students. So Spectra has an out list and an ally list. So a list of people who have chosen to have their name and contact publicly on our website, and the out list and the ally list. So perhaps if there's someone at a school that you're interested in, you could email them. I want to say this with a little hesitancy, because I want everyone to be respectful of people's time. And so, I feel bad. I hope I'm not going to like flood some people's inboxes by doing this here, but I felt that I should include this bullet here. And so now just a recap of what I've talked about then. So for one, there is an LGBTQ plus mathematics community here. Two, I think the emphasis should be, are you heard, or are your students heard? Do they feel included, and do they feel less alone? I want to emphasize everyone should try to make an effort to stay up to date on these LGBTQ plus math events, both for connections and diversity and just seeing what's going on in our community. Then the take-home message for the departments: build general friendliness and thoughtfulness in your department. And in my experience, the diversity of several marginalized groups will come naturally. And for the students, both grad and undergrad, my take-home message for all of you is find your line, find where you will find the line that you will not cross, and stick to that line when you take your next steps. So that's all I had. Again, no math, so I apologize. I can talk about my research if you want in the breakout room, but that's what I have. Thank you.